Hey guys, we are continuing with the Avatar The Last Airbender content today. We're doing an episode tier list ranking. So I got this idea from a user I follow or am subscribed to by the name of Overanalyzing Avatar. So feel free to check out their channel. They did a list where they ranked every Avatar The Last Airbender episode in one of these tier lists, and I didn't necessarily agree with it, but makes sense. Everybody's got their own opinions, so I figured I'd make my own just because that's what we're talking about this week. All of these episodes are in a random order, so I will do my best to decipher what the picture that I am given is. But if you agree with the things that I'm saying, if you disagree with the things I'm saying, feel free to comment below. While you're at it, feel free to like, share, subscribe, do all that you want on this channel. We will be doing more Avatar content throughout the week leading up to our Monday live stream. But let's start here. Ranking all of the episodes, all 61 Avatar The Last Airbender episodes from the S tier all the way down to the Great Divide tier, which I do agree with. We'll get there. Starting with the Waterbending Master. So the Waterbending Master, Season 1, Episode 18. It's kind of the penultimate episode before the finale two-parter. It's the one where Master Paku won't teach Katara at the North Pole because of the fact that she's a woman, and women up there don't learn waterbending for competitive reasons or for battle reasons. It's a good showing for Katara. One thing that you'll notice about me, and you will probably have many thoughts on my take here, I'm not a huge fan of Katara. I'm not a huge fan of her necessarily as a character, but if you are a huge fan of Katara, you probably love this episode. It is great for not just her character, but it sets up kind of all of Sokka's stuff with Princess Yue. It does a little bit for Aang in terms of just humbling him to the societal norms of other cultures that sometimes he doesn't necessarily see. So I think it's all around a pretty good episode. One take that I have that's not original to me is I wish that there were more episodes that kind of set up the North Pole as a location, right? I wish there was more material that we were given to make us care about this place. And the Waterbending Master does a good job at kind of getting us into that mood, but I wish there was more just leading into the Siege of the North. But we will get to those episodes when we get there. All in all, I think that's a B tier episode. Tales of Ba Sing Se, most people's favorite episode, right? A lot of people will say that the Tale of Iroh is some of the best 5 minutes you'll ever see in Avatar The Last Airbender, and absolutely right. I mean, it is definitely a top tier 5 minutes of children's television, and it hits really heavily, just Iroh going about his day. Some of the other stories are pretty lackluster, but they do have some great moments. Obviously, the stuff with Sokka doing the haiku competition. Aang, I used to be obsessed with like zoos and architecture and like categorize. Obviously, I'm obsessed with categorizing things. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a channel about Excel spreadsheets, right? And so him building this zoo to kind of encapsulate all of the escaped animals from the Ba Sing Se Zoo. I loved that growing up. It's not aged for me as well as some of the other portions. I really do like the Zuko, the Tale of Zuko, where he goes on the date with the Earth Kingdom girl. I don't know why I stuttered on those words there. But I think this is definitely an S tier episode. Next, I believe, is the Headband. So that is season 3, episode 2, right? That is basically Footloose, the Avatar version of Footloose, where Aang finds his way accidentally enrolled in a Fire Nation school, and he has to kind of teach these kids that it's okay to go against cultural norms, right? He's kind of trying to push them off the brainwashing of the Fire Nation. It's not a great episode. It does a lot for Aang as a character. It does a lot for Katara as a character, but I am going to put it in... Do I put it C tier or do I put it D tier? For now, we'll put it C tier. I might change my mind about that. Next is the one immediately before that. That's The Awakening. So this is Aang wakes up on a ship and doesn't know what to do with himself because he realizes it's a Fire Nation ship, and he has to, throughout this episode, confront the fact that he has basically let the entire world down. And so it's a super heavy episode. It does a good job setting up the rest of the season. I don't love it as much as some people do. I think it sets up a lot, but for me, there's not a lot of payoff in this episode or the episodes immediately following. Obviously, the episode immediately following is the Headband, which is a more comedy-heavy, like lighthearted episode. I will put this B tier. The Painted Lady. So we're sticking in early season 3. This is episode 3. Katara pretends to be a charity spirit who gives food to this dying community. There is not a lot to this episode. There are not many consequences for the characters out of this episode. The ending of this episode makes very little sense in just a long-term storytelling perspective. It's kind of this fake out for fake out's sake. There's not a lot of substance here that I like. I really don't care about this episode at all. It's not one I would want to go back and rewatch unless I were watching the series just from beginning to end, which I have done recently. I'm tempted to put this in Great Divide tier, actually, but I won't. I'll put this bottom of D tier. Next episode, I believe, is Jet. So you're going to be familiar with Jet, the character, obviously. Heartthrob, he's a vigilante, teen freedom fighter, leader of the freedom fighters. They fight against the Fire Nation because his parents were killed. Probably the heaviest episode up to that point. There's not a lot of heavy stuff that comes before it. And this is definitely a Sokka episode. This is where Sokka really shows that he's more than a comedic character. He steps into his own. I really like this episode. A lot of people don't for some reason. But I do enjoy this episode. I think there's a lot of good comedic bits here. But what this does for Sokka as a character is phenomenal. I'm going to put it in A tier. Next is... I gotta double check here. I think we're gonna skip it because I'm not entirely sure which episode that is. But let's move on over here to Sokka's Master. So Sokka's Master, right? This we're just continuing down the line. This is season 3, episode 4, and this is the one where Sokka is bummed out that all of his friends are benders and he doesn't really have anything going on. So he finds this swords master and basically fakes his identity to make sure that this Fire Nation guy will teach him. And throughout this episode, you see Sokka just coming to terms with basically who he is. I'm really big into the Sokka episodes. I think his character growth is one of the best storylines in the entire series. I really like what this episode does for him. I think it's a great episode all around. I think it's a gorgeous looking episode. I have been to a number of the locations that some of these scenes are based on. A lot of the obviously it's a cartoon, but a lot of the like physical land elements that they used in designing the landscape of Piandao's city and his palace and all that. I've seen a lot of those locations. A lot of them are in Iceland. So if you're familiar with like the Skogafoss waterfall, or I can't remember what that other waterfall is called, but the one that Sokka paints, I've actually been there in person, and it's really cool to see live. So I have that special connection to this episode. I would rank this episode better than Jet, actually. I'm going to put this top of A tier for now. Next we have, I believe that's the Earth King. So this is the 18th episode of season 2. This is after they have gotten Appa back from Lake Laogai. They basically invade the Earth King's palace in Ba Sing Se and try to convince him that Long Feng has created this massive conspiracy, hiding the war from him, hiding the rest of the world from him. Basically what this episode does is set up the final 2 episodes of season 2. There's not a ton of substance here. I do like it, but for what we have ranked so far, I'm going to put the Earth King bottom of B tier. Next is Nightmares and Daydreams. Nightmares and Daydreams is a fun episode. It's the episode right before the mid-season finale of season 3. It's the one where Aang can't sleep because he's so nervous about the invasion the next day, or the next several days, and so he struggles with nightmares and daydreams, literally, leading up to the day of Black Sun and trying to find a way to get himself to sleep. Very much a filler episode, very much a comedic episode, but the comedic parts of this episode are done so well that I do enjoy this episode very much. However, because it's so inconsequential, I am going to put it in C tier, but I will put it at the top of C tier. Then we have The Great Divide. It is going at the very bottom. This is an episode where if you just watched Avatar from beginning to end and you didn't really engage with the fandom that much, but you did like the episode, this is probably the most forgettable episode of the entire series. And they, to the point where they actually make a joke about it in the Ember Island Players. This is the one, right, where they come across two different tribes who have to cross the Great Divide, which is this massive, like, Grand Canyon archetype in the Earth Kingdom, and these two tribes can't get along because of this massive, like, historical difference. And nothing really happens in the entire episode except for the fact that, like, Aang makes up a story at the end to make the pairs resolve their differences. And he doesn't do anything beyond just, like, point out how stupid their differences are. And maybe there actually are some serious problems between these two tribes, and he just kind of shoves it aside, and the episode and the writing just doesn't really doesn't give us anything of substance to make that moment feel earned, if that makes any sense. And there's not a lot going on here. It's very unmemorable, and there's a reason why most Avatar fans regard this as the worst episode in the series. None of the main characters are really challenged, except Aang by the end of it. None of Sokka's opinions are changed by his experiences with one of the tribes. Same with Katara. You get some cool creature design, but all in all, not a lot happens here. Not very well written. So it's going very, very much the bottom tier here. I gotta double check. I think that is the beach. And it looks like it is. So, the beach, that is season 3, episode 5, right? It's the episode where it's centered around Zuko and Azula and Mai and Ty Lee and them spending a vacation on Ember Island. And it's mostly character development for Zuko. It really fleshes out his relationship with his family. Not just the backstory that we already know, but how he feels about that backstory. It also fleshes out some of the other characters. It's mostly just a fun romp. You get to see these characters interact in a comedic way like you've never seen before. There is some inconsequential stuff setting up the Combustion Man storyline for Aang and Sokka and Katara and all that. But very, like, I think it's just one scene that we see that of them. Otherwise, it's very much centered around Zuko and his relationship with the rest of his crew on Ember Island. Very, like I said, very inconsequential, but I do have a soft spot for this episode. I will put it top of C tier. Siege of the North, that is part 1. So this is the penultimate episode of season 1, the first half of the finale. What do we learn in this? I'm trying to remember where the cutoff is. I think at the end of this episode, the moon spirit is killed, and Zuko kidnaps Aang, and basically the battle's all lost. This is all set up to the final episode. So there's a lot riding on this. I think it's a good episode all in all. There's not a lot. All of the best parts of Siege of the North happen in part 2, but I think that this is good enough on its own to warrant a place in the A tier. There's not, like I said, there's not a ton of substance. It's just setting up part 2. So why don't we just rank part 2 then? We start, basically, Aang has been kidnapped by Zuko. So we see Aang in the spirit world. That's when we have all the stuff with Ko, the face stealer. Obviously, you have the sacrifice of Yue. You have Iroh kind of getting his comeuppance against Zhao for his spirit world experience. You have Zuko making some tough decisions about what his role in all of this is. You have the massive spirit battle at the end. A lot of fans regard this as potentially the best episode of the series. I'm not that high on it. I do still think it is an S tier episode, but I think it's far from the best. Not far from the best, but it's not the best in my opinion. The Serpent's Pass. This is about halfway through season 2, right as they're coming into Ba Sing Se. This is after the desert, right? They still don't have Appa, so they have to walk across this Serpent's Pass to get to Ba Sing Se. Very much a character-heavy episode. Aang just kind of comes to terms with loss and hope. Literally, I mean, they name the baby at the end of the episode Hope. This does a lot for the relationship between Sokka and Toph, and also reintroduces Suki to the mix. So, I don't love this episode. I don't think there's a lot going on in the episode, necessarily beyond just like the characters coming to terms with things. I think the middle of season 2 kind of lacks a little until they get to Ba Sing Se. This episode, I'm gonna put it C tier, and I'm gonna put it below Nightmares and Daydreams. The very first episode, The Boy in the Iceberg. This is not an uncommon take, right? But I don't think this is a very good episode. It does what it needs to do to set up the series. It introduces us to all the characters. It sets up some plot points. It puts things into motion. But all in all, it's very much a test the waters kind of episode. There's not... I shouldn't say there's not much of consequence, because obviously the entire series is riding on this episode. But there's nothing super heavy in this episode. There's nothing crazy consequential. This kind of sets up part 2, and part 2 is not that great either, in my opinion. I think this is very much a C tier episode. It's got nostalgia points. I'll put it top of C tier. I'll put it above the beach. But obviously for nostalgia purposes, it's going to be super high, but it's not great compared to everything that comes after it. Avatar and the Fire Lord. This is episode 6 of season 3. This is basically Aang and Zuko going through the backstories of Fire Lord Sozin and Avatar Roku, and how their stories intermix. Very well told episode. The writing is phenomenal. You get to see Roku's life from Roku's perspective and from Sozin's perspective, and it meshes the two very well. And does a lot at the same time for the characters of Zuko and for Aang. And you have that cool moment at the end of the episode where Zuko talks to Iroh and just kind of confronts him about his own personal problems, and then you get the not the cliffhanger, but the cool reveal that Zuko is also descended from Avatar Roku. So a lot of people rank this as an S tier episode. I'm going to, but I'm going to put it at the bottom of S tier. It is a very good episode, one that I enjoy returning to. Warriors of Kyoshi is not a good episode. I have a huge nostalgia spot for it, but it's not great. It's basically Avatar does sexism the first time, and there's not a lot of substance to it. There's a lot of kind of Deus Ex Machina type stuff at the end of the episode with I think it's called the Unagi, the massive fish creature that puts out the fire. Nothing is really resolved with the warriors of Kyoshi and the battle against the Fire Nation. You do get some cool character stuff with Aang. They kind of get that out of the way when they need to, just him having a big head for an episode, and then it goes away, and they kind of get that out of the way early. But I don't love this episode, especially not on rewatches. I'm going to put it D tier above Painted Lady. Avatar Returns. So the second episode ever. I think Avatar Returns is a better episode than Boy in the Iceberg, but not by much. You get, obviously, the cool reveal of Aang being the Avatar to all of his, to Sokka and Katara, and they decide to go travel with him. Zuko is a great character, but kind of like the first one, there's a lot better yet to come. There's a lot better episodes that are yet to follow this one. So I'm putting it above Boy in the Iceberg, but not by much. The library, I have a soft spot for the library just because I love the character design. I love the voice acting in this episode. I love the design of the library itself and the idea of the library itself. This, however, actually, no, this is kind of the two desert stories are kind of the part of the middle of season 2 that propel it forward, in my opinion. I think both of them do it. So I will put this, I'm going to put it above The Awakening, actually. I do really like the library, and maybe that's just my bias. While we're at it, we might as well find the desert here. Where is the desert? Yes. So obviously this is the episode where Sokka just gets high on cactus juice. Everybody knows the sequence, and I'm just setting it there for now just because I can't see all the way. I do think this is an A tier episode. I think it's bottom of A tier. It's good in the way that we've never seen Aang act the way he does in this episode, and we understand why he does. The older I get, the less I enjoy the Sokka stuff, but I think it's just because I've seen it so much that it's starting to lose its humor on me, if that makes any sense. I don't love when Katara gets to be mom. She's always kind of the mom character, and she really is the mom character in this episode, but it shows her in a strong light. Obviously, these characters are dealing with the loss of Appa and just trying to get out of basically the biggest predicament they've ever been in a human versus nature kind of conflict. And Aang's reactions to everything are very well justified, despite the fact that he's angrier than he's ever been. We've never seen him without Appa like this before, and so I think the character work in this episode does enough to pop this up to A tier for me. Next we have, I think that's the Southern Air Temple. So this would be the third episode ever. And I will come back and re-rank this if I'm wrong. But I think that is the third episode ever. I don't love this episode for a couple different... I don't like the atmosphere in this episode, but it does a lot in telling not necessarily a PTSD story, but just it develops Aang's character and his backstory just a little more. Gets significantly heavier than the previous two episodes. I think it's a B tier episode. I'm going to put it above the Earth King. The Swamp. I personally have a soft spot for the Swamp. I like kind of the horror elements of it mixed with the comedy. I don't think they contrast each other too poorly to the point that it's shocking. I think some of the comedy is a little poor, but I do really like the atmosphere of this episode. I think the visions and just the feel of the swamp itself are really well done. And where am I going to put this? I don't know that I can put it B tier, but I think I like it more than the first couple episodes of Avatar, to be honest with you. I'm going to put it top of C tier. This is... double checking here. Which half of the episode is this? This is... I think this is the first half. So this is the Winter Solstice Part 1, the Spirit World, right? This is all the stuff in the village with Heibai, the massive, what turns out to be a panda creature, and Aang learning things in the Spirit World as a result of going after Heibai and learning things about how to control himself in the Spirit World with the assistance of Roku's dragon. I'm nostalgic for this episode. I really do like this episode. It just kind of sets up the next one though. So I'm going to put this also top of C tier. I might come back and re-rank some of these. Cave of Two Lovers. What do I think of Cave of Two Lovers? Secret tunnel, secret tunnel. Through the mountains, secret tunnel. I don't love it, but it's better than the ones I have been ranking, and I think it is better than the Earth King, to be honest with you. So I'm going to put it B tier, but there's a lot of elements I don't like. Obviously, the hippies can be a little much. I don't like the way that the characters are separated, and they kind of force the whole Aang Katara situation. I don't love that part of it. But it does set a lot of their storyline in motion, romantically at least. The King of Omashu. This is episode 5 of season 1. This is where we meet King Bumi. I like it from a set design perspective. Obviously, it's a cartoon, but I like the design of all of the different sets and locations in this episode. Beyond that, though, I don't love much more, and I am going to put this bottom of C tier ahead of the Serpent's Pass. That episode is, I think that's the invasion. So this is the first half of Day of Black Sun. This is the mid-season finale of season 3. I like that they brought back a lot of one-note characters from the rest of the series. I like the design of some of the weapons that they use and their plan to go invade. I do really like the cliffhanger. I think this is the better, in my opinion, this is the better half of the episode. Just because as someone who just, not that I didn't want more Avatar, but like, you want the characters to succeed. And I think there's a lot of hope in this episode until the cliffhanger, and I think it does a great job setting that up. I think this is an A tier episode, and I'm going to put this after Jet, but above the desert. Imprisoned. Imprisoned is bad. It is worse than the Warriors of Kyoshi. It's that bad. Imprisoned's issues are the characters are not interesting. And it's not very well written. You get them saving this guy, and you don't really get any indication of what that means to the man, and it's left ambiguous, and that's basically so they don't have to write around. How do I explain it? There's a lot of very contrived writing in this episode, and like the fact that they can there's a stack of coal on the ship, and so they can earthbend that, and just all of the speeches are really feel very forced, and there's not a lot of great character moments in this episode, in my opinion. I don't love any of the characters. I do like the guy's voice when he goes, the warden, when he goes, "Welcome, Earthbenders." For whatever reason, that's the only part of this episode that really stands out to me. Very much a Katara heavy episode, and I'm not a fan of Katara, so I don't love that. I think her chemistry with Haru is nowhere near some of her relationships with other characters. He's not very interesting. His dad doesn't get very interesting until the end of the episode. I don't love it. I don't love it at all. I would definitely skip this upon a rewatch. This one, I believe, is the second half of the Winter Solstice, and that is called Avatar Roku. So, let me just double check that I'm right on that. Yes. This is the better half. So where did I put the first half? I put it in C tier. This is definitely going high B tier. I'm going to put it top of B tier, actually. I really like the way that this episode introduces Avatar Roku as a character, kind of introduces us to this idea of reincarnations and past lives of the Avatar. Obviously, they mention that in previous episodes, but this is where we really understand what that means and how that affects Aang. I think in terms of just setting up the rest of the series. This does more than any episode before it, and very, very many episodes after it. This is really where we understand the threat of the Fire Nation and what the comet that comes in season 3 is going to do for all of these characters. And I really like that about this episode. Maybe I'm just nostalgic for this episode, but I am going to put it top of B tier. Lake Laogai. Lake Laogai is a good episode. This is where we are at the peak of the whole, like, the Earth Kingdom being a conspiracy type deal. It's kind of the closest. So between this and the swamp, I think this is the closest that Avatar ever really gets. Oh, that's not true. There's one more, the Puppet Master. Those 3 episodes are basically the horror episodes of Avatar, and this one less so horror and more of a just psychological thriller. Just understanding these are very, very mature themes to put in a kid's show, right? And as a kid watching this, you're very put off by it. Like, it's very unsettling, you don't like the brainwashing aspects of it, and it's very creepy, and you're hoping that the good guys can find a way to just expose this like they do in the next episode. Obviously, you have the death scene with Jet, which is left very ambiguous because they didn't want to kill off characters in a kid's show. Definitely an A tier episode. I'm going to put this above Jet, and I'm going to put it. Is it that high? I think it is. I think it's top of A tier. I think Lake Laogai is a great episode. Especially, one thing I didn't mention is the whole Zuko confrontation. When he is the one to set Appa free because of the confrontation that he has with Uncle Iroh in the chambers as the Blue Spirit. That is one of the best Zuko scenes in the entire show. The Blind Bandit. I'm a wrestling fan, if you didn't get that from my channel. I love wrestling. The fact that they combined professional wrestling with Avatar to the point where they actually had Mick Foley as the voice of the boulder. Phenomenal. I love it. I think the rest of this episode kind of lacks, but the fact that it's a wrestling episode combined with Avatar knocks this up to at least high B tier for me. In fact, I am going to put this top of B tier. I don't know that it's an A tier episode. I don't love a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. Everything to do with wrestling in this episode, I love. Everything to not do with wrestling in this episode, I don't. And so for me, I'm going to set it there for now. I think that is the Guru, but no, that is Crossroads of Destiny. So Crossroads of Destiny is definitely the emotional high point of the entire series, in my opinion. I think this is a higher climax than Day of Black Sun is, for the reason that a lot of it revolves around the repercussions of Aang's actions and the repercussions of Zuko's actions, and everything setting up season 3 has to do with this episode. We see Zuko renege on his promise to become good in this episode. He reverts back to wanting to rejoin the Fire Nation and going back with Azula and betraying Iroh. You see Aang basically giving up on what could be his one chance to save the world because he's so attached to Katara. Great character moments in here. You see them working with Iroh for the first time, which is something that's been built up over 2 seasons. We really see him become the good guy that we know he's kind of always been. This is definitely an A tier episode. I think this is an S tier episode. It is definitely above Lake Laogai, in my opinion. I am putting this in S tier. Next, we have The Storm. Storm is an S tier episode. If you're unfamiliar with The Storm, and you are kind of familiar with it, and all you're remembering is the stuff about Sokka in the fishing boat during the storm, that is not what this episode is about. That is the overarching story in this episode, but everything about this episode has to do with Aang and Zuko's backstories. We really learn more about why Aang ran away and how he became trapped in the iceberg. But more importantly, we learn the backstory to Zuko. We learn why he's banished from the Fire Nation. We learn how he got his scar. We learned a lot about why Zuko is the way he is. And there's another episode coming up that I like better for that sake, and in my opinion is the best episode in the series. But this does enough to set up all of these characters in a great way that I think I'm going to put this top of S tier for now. It is a great episode. I think it's the best episode in season 1. It is followed by The Blue Spirit, which is another really, really spectacular episode. All of the character work for Zhao, and Zhao being kind of the big bad of the series. Trying to think what else here. The cool plot point with the Yu Yang, or is it Yu Yang? The archery group. You get the massive speech from Jason Isaac as Commander. I can't remember what his rank is at that point, but from Zhao, in front of the entire fortress. You get all the stuff with Zuko and him and Aang coming at each other and working as a team, and then Aang finds out that it's Zuko, and Zuko realizes that Aang knows who he is, and he's really disappointed in that. It's a cool episode. I really do like this one, and I don't think I can... I really want to rank it as high as The Storm, but I don't know that I can, but I will put it also S tier. These are really spectacular episodes back to back. The Ember Island Players. I love the Ember Island Players. I think a lot of shows do a recap episode very soon before their last episode. And this is done in such a humorous way and such an in-universe, just like meta look at the show, and there's so many jokes that if you're not familiar with some of like the behind the scenes decisions in making Avatar, some of these jokes might go over your head, right? You have Toph being a man, which is originally how they wanted to introduce the Earth Kingdom character for the group. They wanted this burly character, and eventually they settled on having Toph as the kind of the Earth Kingdom representative for the team. You have there's a joke, and I don't know if they still have this out there, but on one episode in season 1, they aired an incorrect frame where Zuko's scar is on the wrong side. They make a joke about that. They make a joke about the Great Divide not being that important. They make all of these jokes about the show itself that, as someone who likes all the behind the scenes stuff, like, those jokes come out even that much more. And as inconsequential as this episode is, on purpose, I love the Ember Island Players. I'm going to put it in A tier, to be honest with you. And I'm going to put Ember Island Players... No, I'll put it... Oh, never mind. I'll put it bottom of A tier. I do really love it. I think Ember Island Players genuinely is better than The Blind Bandit. That is my hot take of the day. Let's see here. This is part 2 of Day of Black Sun. This is going to be the eclipse. This is basically when Zuko confronts his father in the bunker, and the Avatar and Sokka and Katara confront Azula in the kind of the trick chamber. Very much a waste of time episode on purpose. Very much you waited however many months for the second half of the season to start, and we are going to troll you because these characters are being trolled themselves. And very well written episode. However, personally, I just don't like it that much. I think it does a lot for Zuko's character, but beyond that, I don't love this episode as much as I think I should. I'm going to put it B tier, and I'm going to put it... I'll put it above the Pakku episode, but I won't put it above Roku. Avatar Day, another very inconsequential episode. This is one where, if you're not remembering this one, they show up in a random Earth Kingdom town that hates the Avatar and has a celebration for how much they hate the Avatar because their leader from several hundred years ago was Chin the Conqueror, who was this warlord who decided he was going to conquer the Earth Kingdom, and was opposed by Avatar, Kyoshi, thank you, was opposed by Avatar Kyoshi, and Kyoshi indirectly killed him, and so there's this whole, like, trying to clear Kyoshi's name, and like make the Avatar positive in these people's minds, and it doesn't work. And kind of the Deus Ex Machina to the end of this episode is the Avatar ends up saving this village from the Rough Rhinos, Fire Nation outlaw squad, and then they basically redo Avatar Day as they like the Avatar now, and Very much a skippable episode. Doesn't really do much for the rest of the series. I am going to put it mid D tier. Zuko Alone. Zuko Alone is the best episode of Avatar. Both shows. If you're unfamiliar with Zuko Alone, this is... None of the main characters appear in this episode except Zuko. This is him. It's the Western episode. He finds this village and hides his identity, obviously, and basically becomes part of this family for a short period of time where he acts as the older brother to this kid. He acts as kind of a helper to this farm family. And then in a confrontation that he has in the main village because of a crime that this kid has committed, he basically has to expose himself as a firebender, and then is rejected by this family only on the basis that he's a firebender, and they hate him so much, and he should have hidden his true identity, but he couldn't anymore. He had to expose himself, which is a great part of it. It's basically, if you're familiar with I think it's a 60s Western called Shane, or you're familiar with the movie Logan, very similar to those movies, just kind of a standard Western type story. But that's not why this episode is so good. This episode, much like the Storm, tells Zuko's backstory and helps us understand why he is the way he is, right? His father always considered him a failure. His father always belittled him as less than his sister for showing anything that his father deemed a weakness, right? He showed love towards certain people. He showed love towards certain creatures. He showed animosity. He showed restraint, things that his father frowned upon, and the only one who would ever love him is his mother. And then his mother basically has to, in order to save Zuko from death because of a mistake that Zuko's father made, his mother has to disappear. And then basically the one person who really loved him is gone from his life, and we learn the entire backstory of Zuko as a child and why he ended up the way he did, leading into his backstory that is revealed in The Storm. And so this is kind of a precursor that aired later to The Storm. Really does a great job. The writing meshes these two stories perfectly. Watch this episode. It is the best episode of the show, not by far, but definitely stands out for me as the peak of Avatar. Avatar Aang, right? This is, I gotta double check and make sure this is Avatar Aang that I'm looking at here. Yes, so this is the very last episode of the show. We pick up from the cliffhanger of Into the Inferno, where the fights on both sides, all sides actually, just Sokka and Toph are on the airship, and Aang is fighting Ozai, and Zuko and Katara are fighting Azula, and there's cliffhangers all around, and finally we get to this massive, glorious conclusion to the show, where good triumphs over evil, sometimes not in the ways we'd expect, and all of the characters have very resolved arcs to all of their stories. Very well written episode, very well put together story. Just launches off of the backs of the 3 previous episodes that set up this great finale. Definitely an S tier episode for me. In terms of all the other S tier episodes, though, I don't know that this one is as high as some of the other ones. So I'm going to put it bottom of S tier. However, I am also going to put at the bottom of S tier its predecessor, Into the Inferno. This is when we get the start of every battle, right? We get Ozai attacking the Earth Kingdom. We get the Old Masters in Ba Sing Se. We get Zuko and Katara versus Azula in the Agni Kai, and the start of Sokka's plan to take down the airships. I'm putting them in S tier. I am going to probably rearrange some of these, just definitively. Next, we have the Southern Raiders. This is the last episode of consequence in the series. So this is the episode right before the Ember Island players, before we get into the finale. This is probably the darkest episode, character-wise, in the entire series. Katara is dead set on killing the man who killed her father. And it is up to Zuko to not only lead her to that man, but also, meanwhile, talk her out of killing him. Very good character work. As someone who doesn't like Katara, it is a very good episode. I'm going to put this at the top of A tier. Just very well handled, mature themes in this episode. Very well written. Katara is a BADASS in this episode. As someone who doesn't even care for her that much, this episode makes you care about her in a way that I never had before. And I really do like that episode. That I can't quite see that, so we'll come back to it. Let's go with City of Walls and Secrets, right? So this is season 2, episode 14. This is when they're in Ba Sing Se. They meet Ju Di, who's kind of their tour guide, who they discover throughout the rest of the episode has been guiding them away from their goal of bringing the war to the attention of the Earth King because there's a conspiracy going on. This sets up everything in Ba Sing Se very, very well. I think this is definitely top of B tier. I think it is. I think it's the very top of B. Actually, no. If we put Ember Island players, we have to put this in A tier. I'm going to put it above Jet. I am going to put it above Jet. This one we have the Phoenix King. This is the first part of the 4-part finale. Very inconsequential for the rest of the episodes. It sets up Aang going off to the Lion Turtle to kind of get a feel for how he can get rid of Ozai without killing Ozai, if that makes any sense. But not a whole lot else in this episode happens except setting up that conflict. I think it's a B tier episode. I don't love it that much, especially compared to the other 3. I will put it above Cave of Two Lovers. I'm going to put it pretty low on B tier, to be honest. It's a very, very not much happens episode, in my opinion. The Chase. This is the episode where Toph finally joins the team, and for whatever reason, they keep being followed by Azula and her gang, and it's because Appa's shedding and all this fun stuff. And at the end of the episode, we get Zuko and Iroh combining forces with the Avatars group in fighting Azula. We realize Azula is kind of this top-tier threat, and this scene really shows us that there's a 3-way battle that turns into a 2-way battle, and that's what makes Azula kind of seem like this really massive, massive threat. It puts Zuko and Iroh back together, but otherwise, I'm trying to think of things that happen in this episode theme-wise. We have all the stuff that happened with Toph and Katara and just kind of their conflicting personalities, but otherwise, I will put it B tier. I'll put it below the library, but I will put it above the Awakening. Then we have its successor, which is Bitter Work. This is the episode where Toph teaches Aang how to earthbend. There's the comedic moments with Sokka and the baby, is it the moose lion? I'm sure there's another animal that's mixed in there as well. So there's a lot of good comedic bits there, but the overall story in this episode is Aang not being able to earthbend and his struggles with that. I do really like this episode. I think it's better than The Chase, to be honest with you. And I'm going to put it right above The Chase, actually. Yeah, we'll put it right there. I know I did say that I didn't really like the middle of season 2, and maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I just don't like the first half of season 2, because some of these middle episodes are actually very good, in my opinion. One that I don't, however, like that much is The Drill. This is the episode right before they get into Ba Sing Se. It's a very action-heavy episode, very much a fight episode. But in my opinion, not much of consequence happens. I'm trying to think, is this the episode where Jet goes after Zuko, or is that City of Walls and Secrets? I might be wrong. If it's in this episode, I'll rank it higher. But my opinions on this episode, I think this is very much a C tier episode. I will put it above the first two, but I'm going to put it after the swamp. The swamp. That episode is... Gotta zoom in. That is Boiling Rock Part 1. So let's talk about the Boiling Rock. There's a lot wrong with that episode. The tone is kind of all over the place, in my opinion. I think it struggles with the heavy themes of the whole prisoners of war type deal. I think Part 2 is way better. I do like the cliffhanger in Episode 1. I think it handles it really well. But it struggles to balance kind of the comedic stuff, like all the conversation on the airship between Zuko and Sokka is funny, but it feels very out of place in the rest of the episode. It's a very war-heavy episode that tries to balance comedy in there way too much, and it really struggles. It kind of feels like an MCU movie, to be honest with you. So this one's going C tier. I'm going to put it below the beach. But Part 2 is, in my opinion, a bit better. I like the ending a lot. And so this one is going top of C tier. I really like the ending where Zuko basically confronts Azula and May specifically. I think that's a really powerful scene for him and his decisions as a character, where finally he's not going back to the life that he left behind. Really solid character moment for Zuko, and I really like Zuko moments. Firebending Masters is a great episode. The art design in this episode is phenomenal. I'm just setting it there for now, but it is going at least top of A tier. I don't think it's an S. Is it an S tier episode? Yeah, but it's got to go at the bottom. I think it is better than Southern Raiders. But the art design is phenomenal. The story behind the scenes that it tells about Iroh and his backstory with firebending does wonders for it. I really like the way that they basically reconstruct firebending after 2.5 seasons of it. We thought we knew this bending element, and this basically shows us a new side of it that we never really understood. And they obviously did that on purpose, but I think it does wonders for the element in taking it away from this aggressive, always the enemy side of things that firebending has been up to this point in the series. Speaking of firebending, the Firebending Master, I don't love this episode. I don't love a lot of Season 1. I think Season 1 is easily the weakest of the 3 seasons. I think Season 1 of The Last Airbender is worse than Season 3 of Legend of Korra. That is a hot take of mine. I think Season 3 of Legend of Korra is better than Season 1 of The Last Airbender. But this tells a story of just... It kind of does the opposite of what the Firebending Masters does, in terms of it definitely makes firebending seem like a horrific element in just the consequences of fire that the other elements aren't portrayed to have in the rest of the series. I don't think Zhang Zhang is that interesting of a character. I do like the backstory with Admiral Zhao, but nothing of this episode has extreme consequences to me for the rest of the series until Season 3. I don't see much of that in the rest of the show until Season 3, until Aang tries to start learning firebending again, until actually the Firebending Masters. This one I will put above Serpent's Pass, but I am not putting it any higher than that. The Pirates one, Waterbending Scroll. Not a great episode. Not a great episode. Is it D tier? Top of D tier. I'll put it top of D tier. We get a lot in shifting the dynamic of Aang and Katara. We definitely see a side of Katara that we really hadn't before. Um, we learn more about Zuko and Iroh and kind of their side of things, but there's not a like it's a very forgettable. It's probably the most forgettable episode for me right now as I look through all of these other ones and try to think about it. Bato of the Water Tribe is also a forgettable episode for me. This one, Sokka goes through, I can't remember what they call it, but it's basically proving himself as a man in the customs of the Water Tribe um, with the help of his father's friend, Bato. Bato is a fairly forgettable character. He's just kind of a stand in for their father. I like their father way more as a character. Um, what this does more for is Aang's character and his understanding of hiding things from his friends and his worry that people are going to leave him. Yeah, I don't love this episode at all. Is it better than The Deserter? No. Is it better than Serpent's Pass? No. It's gonna go bottom of C tier. Yeah, it's not that. Season 1's pretty weak, to be honest with you. This one, now that I do recognize what these other episodes are, let's just start at the top here. This is part 2 of the finale, the Old Masters. This is when Aang learns things from the Lion Turtle. I don't love the Lion Turtle aspect of it as much. I know a lot of fans have like problems with the lore of lion turtles and all of the things that come out of that, especially in Legend of Korra. I actually don't mind that as much. What I do really like about this episode and that part of it specifically is Aang talking to his past lives. I love when they bring past avatars into things. He gets to talk to Yang Chen and Kuruk and Kyoshi and Roku and just their perspective on everything that he's going through and him not getting the answers that he wants. I think that's a really relatable struggle, and I think it's written very well. Otherwise, in this episode, the crew is kind of looking for Aang, and they find the Old Masters. You get the reunion of Zuko with Uncle Iroh, which is a top-tier moment in the entire show. I think this is for sure an A-tier episode. I don't know that I can put it S-tier because it's just kind of setting up everything else, but I will put it below Jet. I think is a good spot for it. The Runaway. This is the episode in season 3 where Toph and Katara basically run a money laundering scheme where they trick people out of their money for gambling. It's basically a gambling conspiracy. And the repercussions of that are, by the end of the episode, they are both imprisoned and because of their own actions, and then they have the massive final fight with Combustion Man. Obviously, he doesn't die in this episode because he comes back later in the Western Air Temple, but this does wonders for the relationship between Toph and Katara that was kind of set up in season 2. But beyond that, for me, it's a very forgettable episode. I know some people really have a soft spot for this episode because of the comedy in it. I don't love the comedy in this that much. I think it's a solid B tier episode, but I think I'm going to put it bottom of B tier. Return to Omashu. I don't love this episode. I think this takes all of the charm out of Omashu, which might be the point, obviously, because it's taken over by the Fire Nation, but I think it's a very dry episode. I think there's not a lot of consequence to it, except setting up the fact that Aang has to find a new Earthbender to teach him. It reintroduces Boomy. It really introduces Ty Lee and May. That's kind of what this whole story is for. But nothing of this episode really lasts in the memory or means anything to the characters. Excuse me. Oh, it's getting late from my perspective. Obviously, you guys are seeing this air at 10 a.m. I'm recording this at 10 p.m., probably a month in advance of you seeing this. So I am going to put this... below the beach. That's where it's going. The Fortune Teller. The Fortune Teller somehow, for me, is a very forgettable episode. And there's a lot of cool stuff that happens. Obviously, you get the romantic stuff between Aang and Katara. This is really where that starts to develop. And we see hints of that. There's that other character who's in love with Aang, whose name is just escaping me right now. All the stuff with the Fortune Teller, all of Sokka's reactions to that. But then mainly, the cool part is at the end when you get this massive, like, volcano set piece. And I always forget about that in this episode, which is, like, it's the apex of the episode. It's the climax that everything's leading up to. But for whatever reason, maybe it's the writing of this episode, maybe it's the tone of this episode, it's just very forgettable for me. And for that reason, much like a lot of other parts of Season 1, you know what? I'm going to put it above Nightmares and Daydreams, but it's still going pretty heftily in C tier. I'm going to put it above The Deserter. Hot take there. Northern Air Temple. Not a good episode. Aang is very dislikable in this episode, despite him being right. It basically gives... Like, the characters are very forgettable. It's more of a Sokka-centric episode than anything. There's just... I know I keep repeating myself when I say there's not a lot of consequence in some of these, but especially in Season 1, it feels like not a lot happens. You know, it just kind of explores Aang's backstory a little more, helps us understand the culture of the air nomads, helps us understand the technology that the Fire Nation has, but we really don't get much out of this episode for the characters. I'm going to put it top a D tier, but I think it's a D tier episode, to be honest with you. Same with the Avatar State. I don't love the Avatar State. I think it's a very, very weak opening to Season 2. Obviously, you have all of this stuff with Aang entering the Avatar State and learning to control it and being forced into it, and all of the romantic subtext with Katara that leads into the next episode. Where did I put Cave of Two Lovers? I put Cave of Two Lovers towards the bottom of B tier. This is definitely C tier. And how low C tier? I'm gonna put it no. If it's above Northern Air Temple, it's got to be bottom of C tier. And it's not even C tier. I'm going to put it top of D tier. It's just, it's very weak. Very weak. Tonally all over the place until the ending. Doesn't mean much except for understanding the Avatar State itself. Appa's Lost Days is a phenomenal episode. I think it's an S tier episode. We get to understand Appa's journeys during his excursion away from Aang, all the stuff he's been through. It's a very emotional episode told from the perspective of an animal. I think it's bottom of S tier. Not for lack of trying. I think it does a really great job with all of its elements and themes. It's hard to tell a story that good from the perspective of an animal, and somehow they made it work really well through the limited dialogue that they have in the rest of the episode. The Guru is a fan favorite, and I don't love it nearly as much as Crossroads of Destiny. I think it's a solid B tier episode. I don't know that I would put it better than B tier. However, I did put Ember Island Players A tier, and I think this is a better episode than Ember Island Players. So I'm going to set it there for now so we can scroll up. I am going to put it just... Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drop the Guru above Blind Bandit, and I am going to drop Ember Island Players into B tier. I think I have to. Two left, the Puppet Master. This is the closest, like I mentioned earlier, the closest Avatar gets to downright horror. This is like body horror type stuff, blood bending, Very dark episode, very much a standout Katara episode. As much as I don't like Katara, it does wonders for her character. Definitely A tier. Is it better than City of Walls and Secrets? I think yes, but I don't think it's any higher than that. No, I'll put it above Siege Part 1, but that's as high as it's going. I don't think it's as good as Sokka's Master. And last but not least, the Western Air Temple. Western Air Temple just kind of sets up Zuko and his joining of the group. But beyond that, not a lot happens. It's more a just setting up the second half of the final season. And for that sake, I'm putting it in B tier. And I'm putting it... I'll put it above The Awakening. And actually, I'm going to take The Awakening and put it below Southern Air Temple. Okay. So let's go through. D tier. Is Avatar State better than Northern Air Temple? It's close, but I think yes. Is Northern Air Temple better than Pirates? Yes. Is Pirates better than Warriors of Kyoshi? I don't actually think so. Is it better than Avatar Day? Yes. Is Avatar Day better than Painted Lady? Yes. Is it better than Imprisoned? Yes. Okay, I'm satisfied with that. C tier. Boiling Rock Part 2, is it better than the Spirit World? Maybe, actually. I'm kind of second guessing that. You know what? We're going to leave it. We're going to leave everything for now. I think this video has been long enough, and I'm pretty satisfied with the tiers and where we've placed things. So here's where things have been ranked, and I think eventually I will go through and make a video where I do actually rank everything in order. But here's what we have so far. Bottom of the barrel is The Great Divide. D tier, we have Imprisoned, Painted Lady, Avatar Day, Waterbending Scroll, Warriors of Kyoshi, Northern Air Temple, Avatar State. C tier, we have Bato of the Water Tribe, The Headband, The Serpent's Pass, The Deserter, King of Omashu, Nightmares and Daydreams. I'm satisfied with Nightmares and Daydreams being that high. Fortune Teller, Boiling Rock Part 1, Return to Omashu, The Beach, Boy in the Iceberg, Avatar Returns, The Drill. I'm going to put The Drill, I know I said I wasn't going to re-rank things, but I'm going to put The Drill below The Beach, actually, now that I'm thinking about things. The Swamp, The Spirit World, Boiling Rock Part 2, and then B tier, The Deserter, The Earth King, Cave of Two Lovers. Might be a little high, actually. But we'll leave it there for now. The Phoenix King, The Awakening, The Southern Air Temple, The Western Air Temple, The Chase, Bitter Work, The Library, The Waterbending Master, Day of Black Sun Part 2, The Eclipse, Avatar Roku, Blind Bandit, The Guru, Ember Island Players, The Deserter, The Desert is A tier. We're moving up to A tier now. The Desert is at bottom of A tier. Right above, actually, I'm going to switch those. Bottom of A tier is going to be The Invasion, then the Desert, then The Old Masters, then Jet, then City of Walls and Secrets, then Siege of the North Part 1, Then we have the Puppet Master, Sokka's Master, Lake Laogai, and top of A tier I have the Southern Raiders, and then S tier from bottom to top. I think I'm pretty satisfied with the order of things here. Actually, no. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch the places of the Avatar and the Fire Lord and Tales of Ba Sing Se. I think Tales just isn't quite as strong enough as Siege of the North, and I think Avatar and the Fire Lord is above Siege of the North. So, bottom of S tier, Appa's Lost Days, Firebending Masters. I'm going to switch those. I'm going to switch Appa's Lost Days. So, Firebending Masters, Appa's Lost Days, Into the Inferno, Avatar Aang, Crossroads of Destiny, Tales of Ba Sing Se, Siege of the North Part 2, Avatar and the Fire Lord, the Blue Spirit, the Storm, and very, very top is Zuko alone. That is how I've ranked it. Let me know in the comments what you think, what is off, where you would put things, how your opinions differ from mine, call me a stupid idiot if you think so, and why you think that. I really want to know the why. The why is the important part. Don't just throw out angry arguments. Let's have a discussion as to why you think the way you do as opposed to the way I think the way I do, and see if we can find some common ground there. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more Avatar content. If I don't post any more videos this week, feel free to join us Monday afternoon for our Avatar: The Last Airbender live stream. But for now, thank you for joining. We will see you soon.